targeting your customers in a way that tailors communication to their individual preferences and in a way which they can actually get value out of what you're sending them, putting the customer at the heart of what you're doing. Welcome to the CX Equation, a podcast by TAP CXM.
We share actionable insights and real-world case studies to equip you with the tools you need to drive loyalty, engagement, and sustainable growth.
We're your hosts, Chantelle Casey
and Mark Clydesdale. Hello and welcome to episode 1, our pilot. We're diving straight in at the deep end today, exploring one of the fundamental elements of modern customer experiences. We'll be talking about the power of personalisation in marketing.
Yeah, and we'll cover why it's important, give some real examples of companies getting it right and wrong, but we won't be naming and shaming, and we'll offer tips on how you can implement real-time personalisation at scale in your organisation, the kind that drives loyalty and all the great things that come with it. Less churn, more customer lifetime value, and greater revenue.
It's a big topic and we've only got about half an hour, so let's jump straight in. Here's your first taste of the CX equation. So yes, personalisation. Let's start with the first question, Chantelle. What is personalisation?
I think it means different things to different people, doesn't it? Like people might count personalisation as including a name in an email, but people also, there's differences there. I think it depends on who you ask what personalisation is, but in my opinion, it is targeting your customers in a way that tailors communication to their individual preferences and in a way which they can actually get value out of what you're sending them, putting the customer at the heart of what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree. For me, it's about relevance. I think relevance is the number one thing. It's about making whatever marketing we send to a customer as relevant to them as possible. And for me, there's very much a hierarchy of importance between how relevant it is and, as you say, whether I've put your name in there. So it's great if I can make it feel personal. But if you send me something that references me in some way, that's still not as impactful as if you sent me something I was genuinely interested in the first place. So I think it's all about getting that relevance right.
Yeah, it's about creating that warm, fuzzy feeling inside for the person to make them feel special and engaged by a brand.
And everyone talks about it. And I think we talk a good game about personalisation, but it's amazing how many businesses we go into today and still find lots of people really struggling to deliver it. So why is it so hard?
I think people love to jump to the point that it's the technology that they don't have. That's why they're struggling with personalisation. But I think there's a lot of things laid in there. And more than often than not, we find it's more around strategy and operational processes around delivering personalisation. I think people always want to invest in new tech to fix a problem, and it's not always the answer. Yeah, as well as not having the right data on customers or using data in the right way. Lots of businesses have massive data silos where, they're collecting all of this data on customers and they have loads of sources and loads of touch points, but they actually aren't using that data and acting on it in a way which is valuable to the customer.
Businesses tend to jump straight into trying to kind of optimize something I'm sending without having started with really understanding who the customer is and therefore why do I want to talk to them differently. You've also found that different teams have had access to different levels of data, right? So a CRM team might have a name and an email address and they might know how a customer's responded to an email or a text message, but that's historically been separate to the web behavioral data that's happening and whether I can log in or not and hand raise, and that might be separate to another data source. So I think teams have had to get used to using different types of data, and then they ultimately end up kind of optimizing their bits in their own ways without coming back to, this is the core customer, this is the person that I want to talk to. I understand them, I understand what motivates them, I understand their needs, and therefore I should now start to build an experience that helps them with those needs. But if you don't have the data to understand the customer in the first place, it's obviously going to be very challenging to then personalize it.
Yeah, for sure. I think at the other end of that, there's also the side of we have all this data and we need to act on every single data point that we have. And therefore, you're sort of spamming the customer, maybe at times where they won't necessarily engage with your, with your brand or make a purchase or open an email or whatever it is. I guess that's where modeling comes in a little bit. But yeah, there are some companies that they think the more data that they use and the more data that they act on, the better the experience for the customer. But sometimes that can actually go the other way, and it can create it can break trust with a brand that a customer has if they're messaging them too much or tracking their behavior too much. I think it's a thin line between creating that perfect personalized customer experience and actually being a bit of a stalker to them.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I would argue that sometimes saying nothing would be an effective use of personalization. If I recognize that the customer needs to be left alone for a moment or isn't interested right now or there's something else to solve, that would be personalization, is not sending them something.
Yeah, exactly. I would actually argue that sort of having customer preferences in that way and is also personalization. So actually having a preference center which has different types of communications. For instance, if you're in retail, they can subscribe to women's wear or homeware or whatever it may be, instead of just having a blanket. Everyone wants to be talked to about the same thing. So that, I think, aside from the actual content of the email, the types of preferences customers have are also relevant to the sort of personalization conversation.
I think you've hit on a really core element there. You tend to find any large business, as they have scaled, they have then set themselves up around product groups. And the number of clients that we go into today where there is still a P&L at a category level. So if you're a retailer, as you say, it might be women's wear, it might be homeware, it might be consumer electronics. If it's financial services, it might be loans, mortgages, savings accounts. If it's a telco, it might be the fixed line versus the mobile versus the broadband. The business grows around those areas, and as it scales, it puts more and more focus on those areas. And so then marketing sometimes becomes a vehicle for those categories needing to drive their own revenues and their P&Ls. And so marketing becomes a function of telling the customer, here's my women's wear deal, and then telling the customer, here's my homeware deal, and telling the customer, here's my electronics deal. And we lose the essence of coming back to what is relevant and important to that customer, and how do I send them something that they are interested in. Maybe it's across multiple categories if I'm able to figure out a way of doing that, but the scaling of the business sends us down this road of telling the customer and interacting with them in a way that the brand, the business, the category has prescribed, rather than interacting with the customer in the way that the customer might have wanted. And I think quite often it's that culture shift, it's that thinking shift that we need to get to, as well as the technology element and the data element, to say, well, no, if I am the most relevant to the customer and I talk to them about the thing that they are most interested in, all of my product categories will grow, because the customer will be more engaged with the brand and it will trust me more when I send them stuff, and they will respond to it more highly.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that also highlights the sort of silo, as well as the data silos, the sort of silo between teams as well, in terms of how they create those experiences.
We know the culture change bit, though, is pretty hard. So thinking of the data and the tech element, like, what do businesses need to start doing personalization effectively?
I mean, the obvious, straightforward answer is good data, right? You want to be collecting data on customers, but also, I mean, in the age of CDPs, maybe you don't need a CDP with all the bells and whistles on, but you need to have a really good idea what that single customer view is and where different touch points are coming from. So again, I'll use retailer example. If someone's going into a bricks and mortar shop, you need to be able to identify that person also visited the website and viewed a different product. So I think from a data foundational point of view, that unified customer view is quite important if we want to work our way towards this personalised at scale customer experience, where you have a good view across all touch points what your customers are doing, so you don't have fragmented data. So I think that's quite important. From a technology perspective, I think that you can probably get a lot of value out of the products that you already have in a way that you don't realise. In terms of like dynamic content and personalisation, there are some easy wins you can get out of, for instance, like a normal ESP. If you're using dynamic content, if you've got the data, then it's easy to tailor communications and content to different preferences or product recommendations or whatever it may be. I think we're going more in the direction of decisioning now. Decisioning's always been around, but maybe it's not been integrated in the MarTech stack in a way which makes it sort of very quick to act upon in real time. So I think from a decisioning standpoint, if we want to get to the point where in real time, we are deciding a piece of content which is best for the customer at that point in time, rather than pre-prescribing sort of variants of emails to segments of customers, then there's a decision element to the technology as well.
And aren't we seeing with AI and everything happening around that, you're seeing more of the tools that were in the decisioning space starting to think about how they can use AI to provide some of these capabilities, right? Where I can make build a recommendation engine or build an offer engine that says this is the right thing to say to this customer at this time.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think with that comes better modelling and the sort of the notion of the next best action. That's sort of historically what we said. What is the next best action for the customer, whether that's deciding on the time of send or what the content is, product recommendations. I think now there's this notion of next best everything. So instead of just looking at segments of customers and what the best action is for each segment of customers, it's about looking at individuals and what should their journey look like, rather than just like the next touch point. So yeah, I've heard that term next best everything as a newer term.
What's the three-letter acronym for next best everything? Like, because you can't do anything in our world without making it. Yeah. NBV, MBE, who knows?
Yeah, I'm sure something will catch on.
So I need to know who the customer is, I need to understand them, and then I need a meaningful way of saying what I think is the right thing to them. Then I can start thinking about how I maybe kind of tailor that to them in a way that, because I might decide that both you and I are interested in the same product, the same offer, but that you might respond to it if you phrase it one way and I might respond to it in another way. So I think that's when we get into that bit, right? But fundamentally, we needed to understand who we were and what we might be interested in first.
On a principle basis, that sounds very simple. We need to understand our customer, but I think there is a massive, like you said earlier, there has to be a massive shift in the ways of thinking and the perspective on how people look at marketing, because traditionally it's not looked at through that lens.
And it is easier for different verticals. So one of the joys of the job we do is we get to work for clients across the spectrum. You can go into a telco or you could go into a bank and they generally know everything about their customers, right? Because I have signed a contract with them. I have this phone, I have this bank account. I can basically trace everything the customer does back to an ID. Whereas if I'm a bricks and mortar retailer, I don't know anything. I've got anonymous transactions, which is why you see more and more businesses trying to give me a way of either identifying myself, such as a loyalty scheme, or a direct-to-consumer offer, such as online shopping or something else I sign up for. So then you know who I am, because as much as we're getting better at kind of probabilistic matching and things, I still think rooting in identity makes it much more easy to personalize effectively, because you can start to really understand me better and get to those needs. But if you've not been used to doing it, if you've not been used to taking that data and interrogating it at a customer level, I think that's a shift that people have to make. That the first thing they need to understand is who are their customers, who are their audiences, what are their different interests, and how do those interests mean that they might respond differently to different things.
Yeah, and how are they going to gain value out of their products, and tailoring the communications to that as well. Because I think sometimes companies or our clients have targets that they have to meet, and normally it might be a number of items sold, or even just like a number of items marketed to, for instance, but actually you're not looking at how is the customer going to get value out of those items, and tailoring your communications around that. So I think that's key as well.
I think it's becoming more important as well. I don't know about you, but I just think as the world advances and we all become more savvy and understand our data, I think now we know companies have our data. We certainly know when we've signed up to something and given them their data. And then I think we get really, really annoyed if they don't use it. Vanilla is no longer good enough. If you've captured data on me, you've got to deliver something to me that is relevant and personalized. Otherwise, I'm just going to get really frustrated with you as a brand.
All of our attention spans are shortening, and we're not spending long looking at emails or articles or push notifications, or however you look at, however you do your research. We're just going on to the next thing. So it's got to jump out and add quick value, I think.
I'm going to pick on two brands now. So not clients, but just brands I experience every day. As most people are, I'm probably signed up to 4 or 5 different streaming services nowadays because they keep splitting their content. Netflix is very good at telling me when I go onto the platform, here's something I think you might like because you watched this, here's this, your next watch, your next series, and so on. They are good at using data. They are good at using data in how they present things to me. They're good at using data to even build their programs based off what people are watching. Similarly, Now TV, and sorry for picking on you, Now TV, but about 2 months ago, or when it came out, I was straight on to The Last of Us Season 2, right? Wanted to watch that. Emma and I powered through it straight away. Finished that. What do we watch next? And we decided to watch The White Lotus Season 3. And every single time that we fired up Now TV and put on an episode of The White Lotus, we had to watch a 40-second pre-roll advert for something else on their platform. 8 out of 10 times, it was The Last of Us Season 2, something I'd already watched. And so all I want to do right now is watch The White Lotus, and I've got to wait 40 seconds for an advert for something I've already watched on their platform. It's really frustrating. And especially when, I say there's so many streamers out there, customers' experiences are based, their expectations are based on their best experience, right? If Netflix can do it, why can't Now TV do it? Now, I know in the background there will be different investments in different systems, but you and I work in the space that we know how hard it is. Not everyone is. And I then think it even cascades out that customers don't just compare their banks to their other banks and their websites to their other websites and their shops to their other shops. The experience that companies like Netflix and Spotify and Amazon offer us become the expectations kind of across the board. And we want our banks to treat us as people. We want our mobile phone providers to treat us as people and be relevant. So I think expectations are constantly changing and you've got to get it right. Otherwise, customers like me will think, oh, it's just not a good enough experience and I will take my business elsewhere.
Yeah, for sure. And like you say, there's so many options now, so it's very easy to do that and to go get a free trial on another streaming platform. I think especially with the sort of introduction now, it's more on the sales side than the marketing side, but with agentic AI and how, robots are the ones that are talking to us now. And it's very apparent, at the other end of a customer service agent, you've got a robot not, automatically answering your questions. I think that's why it's even more important on the marketing side to make customers feel like they're not being spoken to by a robot.
Still feel have some form of human connection, right? You do understand me and I'm not just the number that you're trying to make some money out of.
Yeah, exactly. And that might be in the language, but also it might be, the tone of the email, but it also might be, giving someone a specific offer because they bought, for instance, Tesco Club Card are always giving me offers and things that I already buy. I don't know if that's a coincidence, but it feels like that's probably quite a good personalisation thing. They have all my data on me now, so they can, but that works in my favour, even if it's like 10p on a banana. Every penny counts.
We've tried to break it down into, a basic framework for how to get it right as a business. So super high level, I think the 4 things you need to think about when you're trying to deliver more personalised marketing. And we break it down into offer, message, timing, and channel. So the offer, I don't necessarily mean a discount. I mean, what is it as a business you want to say to your customer? So that could be a product launch or a particular promotion or a discount, but it could just be something you think the customer's interested in, a change to services, a newsletter, their local store is closed, there's a change to opening hours. It's the thing I want to say, and this is the area, back to the beginning, getting this bit right, so you actually talk to the customer about something they were interested in the first place is really, really crucial. And that's where the data comes in to know who the customer is. And then thinking about all of the things that I could say to them that would be relevant. Message is where I think people do spend their time on personalisation, because that is where I've then decided this is what I want to say. How do I phrase it in a way that is more personal? So I say, hi, Mark, or I reference something else I've already bought, or maybe I use a different language for someone that I think is a family or know is a family with kids versus maybe an older customer or a younger customer or people of a different demographic. And I think more investment goes into this because it's obvious to people how to kind of test it, and I can write different subject lines, I can write different copy, I can use different images, and I can see how kind of effective they are. Timing I think is one of the most underappreciated elements. I remember a previous bank that I've worked with, and we did an email test, and the two emails were identical, the same imagery, the same copy, same everything, but they were sent at different times, and we generated a 33% uplift in the conversion rate of that email just by sending it at a time that the customer was more likely to respond to it. So again, I need the data, but timing is also, I think there's still businesses today that say in outbound marketing, emails or things, the time that it goes to the customer can be more dependent on how long it takes the system logic to flow through and someone to actually press send in the marketing department than it be based on the customer. And then channel is where it really starts to get complicated. I think we're now getting into real optimization. If you've got the rest of it right, this is where you start thinking, well, that customer tends to respond better to push notifications than to emails or SMSs and whatever. I might have a cost element to evaluate it, but sending a customer something in a channel that then prefer to use is always going to be more effective than sending it to one that they don't behave in. So as a basic framework, offer, message, timing, channel, and then building your kind of your data and your technology and your strategy around being able to enhance each of those things.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Just to add to the channel one as well, I think if your customers have a preference for multiple channels, or the data shows that they have likely to respond to, I think it's about making it consistent experience as well. So tailoring, if you have offers on your website that you're making recommendations to your customer, or you're offering them some money off or whatever it may be, make sure that's consistent with the messaging in your emails as well. I think sometimes companies have sort of disjointed experiences between channels like email, SMS versus other channels like web content or paid media or things like that. So I think it's important for the messaging to be similar.
When you look at all the kind of the MarTech out there nowadays, there's no reason, right, that I can't be tailoring offer and message and even timing within, even a fairly basic marketing automation platform or email tool.
No, most tools now they'll probably have more than you need, to be honest. I think most tools now have all of those capabilities. So from an offer perspective, I think there are specific tools that might do that side of the personalisation better, and actually creating the offer content and using it sort of using microservices, that kind of design, rather than trying to do it all within one tool. So figuring out what the best offer is for the best person, and then activating that to the actual ESP or activation platform, I think is quite common. From a messaging perspective, obviously that's dynamic content, etc., is normally done in a MarTech platform, and that's very easily done. Timing wise, a lot of MarTech platforms or marketing automation platforms now have send time optimization. So they'll have their own AI models which figure out what the best time is and what the best channel is to be sending your customers, what the best time is to be sending your customers communications. But also clients do their own as well. So factor in other, if you want to factor in other data points that maybe isn't native to the platform, then that's also quite common.
On the message bit, do I need a CMS? Do I need a content management system to be able to do dynamic content?
It depends on the complexity of how you want to do it. I think it works well if you do have a CMS, and it depends on what your operational processes are. So if you have teams that are doing the creative side of it, and maybe that gets passed over to a different MarTech team who's going to code it to be, responsive in email and to add in the actual dynamic logic, then I think that would probably be slightly different approaches. But I think it's quite traditional for CMSs to be used, but they don't necessarily need to. A lot of ESPs now, or marketing automation platform, have their own content management sort of templating capabilities within them.
It's amazing. So again, thinking of our experiences with some of our clients, we'll have clients who want to do personalization, and the first thing they want to know is, do I have the right technology? Do I need a CMS? Do I need a DAM, a digital asset management, and those things? Whereas sometimes you go in and the problem is simply either how they're thinking about it or how the processes are set up. So one of the biggest barriers I think you can ever find to delivering personalization, people's, managers, brand teams, legal teams desire to sign off everything that a customer is going to see before the customer sees it. So when we're talking personalization in a big company, you as a big business in the UK could easily have 1, 5, 10 million customers, right? And if you don't want them all to get the same thing, how many versions do you need before I'm starting to tailor messages? Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. There's no way I could get to that many versions of things if someone wants to sign off everything, every bit of coffee, every image, how everything is constructed before the company sends it to you. So, we worked with a client recently who was talking about the need for a CMS and kind of said, you don't need one and until you change your mindset towards how marketing is approved, because it doesn't matter what the CMS does if you're not prepared to let a system trust putting the components in the CMS together in a way that you don't have to approve it beforehand. So I think getting personalization right, there is data, there is technology, but there is a way of working to it as well that is required if you're going to do it well.
I think also we're seeing more of a move towards marketer-friendly systems. So traditionally there was a lot of coding involved and it would be more technical teams that would be building out the emails. But I think because marketing teams want and need more agility around their processes, we're seeing tools that serve marketers, so they don't necessarily need that technical understanding or the coding capability, but they might have a drag and drop interface. So when it comes to content management, it's a lot easier for a marketer to build out emails quickly or to be a bit more dynamic in the way they work instead of going through these long, convoluted processes of, raising project requirements to tech teams and then them having to build it out and test it and etc. So I think there's a lot more agile way of working in that respect now.
And the tech's trying to make it so people can be more agile and more autonomous. Again, the business has to enable that. There's no point in the tool giving me that capability if I still have to then go through a lengthy sign-off and my own business makes it more difficult for me. So yeah, lots to change. So I don't want to make it sound harder than it is. Yes, there's a few parts to get right, but I think to summarize, personalization is becoming more important than ever because customers know that businesses have their data and they expect it to be used effectively. You need to start with understanding your customers. That's the fundamental thing, knowing who different customer types are and what interests them and what their needs are. And then you need to build experiences that serve them things that they're interested in, that are relevant to them. And then you can optimize, the messages that you use and the times that you send them and the channels that you send them in. Technology is enabling us to do that, and it only continues to advance, getting better with AI and determining the offers and the timings, and getting easier to build things in a more dynamic way for customers through marketer-friendly drag and drop. So think about what you're trying to do, figure out if you've got the data and the technology to deliver it, and then make sure that you have the ways of working in the business that actually enable you to do so.
Agree on all points.
Okay, so we'll wrap up there. Thank you for listening to our first episode.
And if you enjoyed this episode, you think it might be useful for someone a friend or a colleague, please do share the CX equation with them.
The CX equation is brought to you by TapCXM. To find out more about what we do and how we can help you, visit tapcxm.com.
And then make sure to search for the CX equation in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you usually find your podcasts. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes.
On behalf of the team here at TapCXM, thank you for listening.